let's get on to the topic today. First off, I want to thank everyone for joining us. The past few months, and even more so the past few weeks, have been especially tumultuous, and we know how precious time is. It's also made us reflect on what each of us can do as individuals and as companies to create an equal playing field for all. And while today the conversation at hand is gender equality, we must also recognize that there are additional prejudices and challenges that BIPOC and LGBTQ communities and other minority groups face on a daily basis that make the broken rung on the ladder to leadership even more difficult to climb. BrainStation's hope today is that we can have an inspiring conversation about the unique experiences of these amazing leaders you're going to hear from, that you'll be able to walk away with things that you can put into practice to achieve your next career goal. But also, we hope you'll learn how you might be able to help others do the same. And so with that, I'm going to stop speaking and hand over to Claire, who's going to introduce herself and our amazing group of panelists. Hi, Claire. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me, and what a great introduction. I'm Claire Carr. I'm the VP of Marketing at Chief, and this topic is something that we live and breathe every day. If you're not familiar with Chief, we're a private network of executive level women, and we know that women have always been powerful, and our mission is to support them so that they can get into and stay in senior leadership positions, whether it's the C-suite Fortune 500 companies, the founders of the next unicorn startups, future leaders of our cities, states, and nations. We believe that women need to lead the way. We currently have members in New York and LA and Chicago. We hope to be bigger across the nation and maybe across the world very soon. And really, when I think of women and anyone in leadership, it gets lonely at the top. And for women, and as Ian said, for anyone that is not maybe someone we've typically seen at the top level of leadership, gets lonely a lot sooner. And so our network is all about supporting each other, about problem solving and being each other's brain trust, so that they get to tap into this really strong support network that they might not have within their own company or even within their own industry. So we are thrilled to be a part of this today and lead this conversation because we are always looking for ways to support women in any capacity, and getting into those leadership positions is a huge step of that. So I'm really excited for the leaders that you're going to be hearing from today, our panelists. I'm going to introduce them, but they're really going to introduce themselves because they'll do a much better job of it. And then we'll dive into the questions that they are going to that we're all going to share with each other. All right. So first up, we have Monika. Monika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Ian, for having me on this panel here. I'm Monika Saksena. I am Director of Global Partnerships and Tools at Google. I've essentially grown up at technology companies such as Hewlett-Packard and Microsoft. So as a woman of color, I've clearly experienced all the challenges that one as a woman has to go through, and then also seen things around that I feel we have to talk about more, because talking about things is the first step towards driving change, as we all realize in this environment. So really pleased to be here.
Great. Thank you. We are thrilled to have you. Next, I actually don't know the order of the slides. Do you want to go to the next? Make sure I'm introducing the next person. Thank you. Next, we have Tonia, the CEO of Chopra Global. Tonia.
Hi. First of all, I want to thank BrainStation and Ian for having me, and Claire for moderating today in this very, very important topic. After spending my career in media at big media companies, most recently at Univision, a leading Hispanic media company, about a year ago, I decided to pivot and to really follow a personal passion of mine in health and wellness, and am very privileged to now lead Deepak Chopra's company, Chopra Global, which we're in the process of relaunching so that we can democratize well-being to really the global population, which is needed now more than ever. I've been really struggling, as I'm sure many of you have, in terms of all of the unrest in our health system and in our social values currently. But I do believe that we're really facing right now a reset for humanity. And so what really gets me through every day is the notion that all of this is going to be for much needed progress that's really needed throughout our society, no matter who you are, what your background, what your story is. And speaking of story, I also wanted to share that I'm a mother of three, 21, 18 and 13-year-old, two boys and a daughter, and have been married to my husband for 25 years. I share that only because that very much shows up with me in the workplace and is very much a part of my story. So I offer you myself and all my experiences, both professionally and personally. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, and we welcome everyone who might be joining us today while their children are likely potentially in the background somewhere, or while you're co-teaching them. We just had our last day of school ourselves for my preschooler, so we know the feeling. And next up, we'd like to welcome Danica Nelson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danica. My pronouns are she and her. I am a senior marketing communications manager at TELUS, where I've worked for 12 years in a few different roles. I have a bit of a unique career story in the sense that I actually started in the stores selling cell phones for 5 years to put myself through university. And since then, I've slowly climbed the corporate ladder to become to the role that I'm at now. I'm very passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, because as I've slowly started to climb that corporate ladder, I've noticed a lack of Black representation, and I haven't seen a lot of women who look like me at the table. And with that, I just think that representation is so important. You know, you really do need to see to believe. So I do a lot of work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space with an emphasis on intersectionality. As Ian stated at the beginning of this call, you know, there's a lot of interlocking systems of power that impact marginalization, you know, whether that be race, religion, ability, sexual orientation. There's a bunch of different things that impact the way that people are able to succeed, both professionally and personally. So yeah, I'm an advocate for EDI, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Great. And we're going to ask you about a lot of those things throughout the next hour. All right, Serena, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, BrainStation, for pulling all this together, and everybody for taking time out of their very, very busy days to participate in this discussion. I think it's a great panel, and I'm excited to be a part of it. So I am currently the Director of People Experience and Strategy at Mars Discovery District. I'm relatively new. This is my third week in the role, where previously I was at Microsoft for Startups, working with the Canadian team. So my background is actually quite blended as well. I came from the corporate world, working everywhere from the mining industry in Brazil and Canada to management consulting, and recently I've been spending my time in the startup world, having worked for a fintech, starting my own startup consultancy, and now being at Mars. So, you know, the importance of me showing up today is, you know, the simple fact that I think I found the area and the role that I want to play in our progress towards more equality, inclusive environments and cultures. And for a long time, I was quite muted in my career. I kept my head down, I plugged through the work, but I experienced in so many ways the systematic barriers that do exist. And so now I'm embracing the role that I want to take on and have evolved into, which is to be a voice, to be a sponsor, and to be a leader in it. And so it's important to show up at events like these and for the people in my networks to advocate and also be that push for progress. So thank you for having me here.
Well said. Yes. And last but not least, we have Catherine.
Hi, hello everybody, and thank you also to BrainStation. It's such a pleasure to work with you. My name is Catherine Hunter. I am a partner with EY here in Canada. And I'm sure a lot of you will know EY. We think of our roots as a an accounting firm. My role in the firm is as the leader for technology transformation, our services that we bring in our consulting practice to our clients. About half of our services are focused in technology. And it's been through that we have decided to sponsor a scholarship for women in technology with BrainStation, and so we're really happy to do that, and so impressed with BrainStation and all that you do, and really looking forward to collaborating with you. In terms of my own career, it's been anything but a nice clear trajectory. I kind of think of it a bit more of like a squiggly line in terms of getting to where I am today. I have worked almost exclusively with health and public sector clients during my career, and I kind of fell into technology about 20 years ago now. And we're all users of the health system. More recently, we've seen a huge spotlight put on public health, and it's the poor cousin of the health system. It's very underfunded, but there's a huge need in health to have better technology enablement and a lot better information sharing, so that we don't have to bear that onus on ourselves to always know exactly what is our own personal health information, and so that it's shared more broadly. So digital health is absolutely a passion of mine. I really believe it can serve us far more greatly as a society than where we're currently at. We've got lots of progress to make there. I've had the pleasure of working largely in professional services, serving the market, and through that have had some wonderful mentors, some wonderful female mentors, and I've had the opportunity to do that, to serve as a mentor as well myself, and to get a better appreciation for the diversity that's needed in professional services and consulting. There's a large, huge focus on it from the firms. And so I'm very happy to be part of this today, and hopefully I can share that with you all, share some of those perspectives and some of my own experiences, and learn from yours as well today. Thank you.
Great. So actually, I'll turn the first question right back over to you, Catherine, which is the concept of the broken rung and the very first step you take to get to that management position, to get from into the leadership world at all. And I think what I'd really like to ask is, just looking back, how did you do that? What was your experience with it? What maybe is something you learned to do or not to do that you give advice to with other women?
Sure. So this is actually my second time at EY. I left the firm many years ago, and it wasn't long after I was promoted to manager within the firm. These big firms have quite a structure within them, a career progress structure. And manager is one of those points where we know that we lose a lot of women. And I think at the time I was perhaps a perfect example of that. I didn't at the time know how to progress within the firm, while I was also thinking about starting a family. I knew that my job required a lot of travel at the time, and I was trying to reconcile for myself how best to proceed. And at the time I didn't see that path. But I reflect on that, and I really realize a few things that I could have done better at the time. I could have asked more questions. I could have looked for a female mentor to help guide through some of that decision making. I think I perhaps should have been a bit more honest about wanting to stay in my home city at the time and not travel, and have something where I wasn't feeling like I was pressured to work in various environments and at all hours of the day. So that's something that I could have done better. What I'm seeing now in firms, and I think there's lots of great things happening, more supportive networks, more communities of practice, groups where women can come together and talk about some of these concerns and feel the support from one another and speak openly and candidly and seek out mentors, and also seek out sponsors. And sponsorship is so important. You know, people who believe in you, believe you will do well, and help guide you through some of those decision makings and some of those next steps in your career.
And I'll take you up on that. You just mentioned sort of the maybe lack that you learned later of advocating for yourself. Mm-hmm. And Danica, you have spoken about needing to voice for yourself how important that is. Can you talk a little bit about the things maybe you've asked for? Have you ever had to walk away from something because you asked for something and didn't get it? Is that fear something that is you find women have a harder time with? What's the self-advocacy that you tell other women about?
Absolutely. I think women are often taught that we need to be humble and we need to be silent about our accomplishments. And, we have a lot of fear when it comes to speaking up and asking for the things that we deserve. But rather than having that fear, I think we need to have the audacity. We need to have the audacity to put our hands up, ask for referrals, apply for roles that we might not have all of the qualifications for, but we think that we can probably do it. I think it's so important to nominate yourself for awards or for anything that you really feel like you deserve. And I think it's also important to keep a running list of your accomplishments, both personal and professional. So when it does come times of looking over your yearly accomplishments and those discussions with your leadership, you kind of have those things ready to go. Self-advocacy is so important. I think that I've just learned that it's so important to continue to speak up for yourself. Absolutely, 100%. And, we're often taught, like I said, to be humble. In my culture, we have a phrase in Jamaican culture says, self-praise is no praise. And I've just learned that, we have to absolutely be our own cheerleaders and our own PR teams, because we're not always going to have people to speak up for us. And, we really have to take on that role and pick up the mic ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And then the reverse of that, of course, is that as women, it's Catherine, you mentioned we should be mentoring and sponsoring other women. And I'm interested, maybe Tonia, as a CEO, you can speak to this. What's our role in terms of advocating for others and how we think? What do you think about, in terms of your own organization or how you've seen it other places of advocating for junior levels and junior teams and how you think about that?
Yeah, and I think sponsorship is incredibly important. But I think first, we have to think about the environment that we often find ourselves in. And even well before I got into the C-suite and into, a CEO role, I was guilty, as many are, of thinking that once we advance through the corporate ladder, we get into a room and there are very few women in that room sitting next to us. So I think as a default, we tend to believe, okay, I'm here, I got to hang on for dear life. And because it's likely that I'm not going to get another opportunity, or there are going to be more seats that are going to be open and available to other women. So I think in many ways that for me and for others that I've witnessed, it has really inhibited our promotion of other women, below us. And I came to learn that and realize how incredibly important it is to make sure that we reach down and we're pulling other women up and we're giving them the exposure to that room, to oftentimes the men that are in that room. And I think it's the onus is also on us that as we're pulling them up, we're also preparing them for what they should expect to experience once they join, or once they're in that position. It's not easy. Just getting into the room doesn't mean that the job's over in terms of trying to secure equality. It is a never-ending challenge. And so I think it's really, really important that we help prepare the women that we bring up for what to experience there, and the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. The sponsorship piece of it plays very much into that. Catherine talked about mentors, and I've had some incredible male and female mentors in my life, but sponsorship is really what is going to make change happen. Sponsorship where I've put myself, my own political capital that I have in an organization, I've put them behind individuals, and not just women, by the way, also, minorities, because unless there is equal representation, the problem is never, ever going to be solved. So that's where sponsorship comes at such a high value. And Danica said it really well that, men are often promoted on their potential, where women are only promoted on their track record and demonstrated success. So I think, reaching down, pulling women up, sponsoring them, even though they may not check every single box of qualifications that is desired for any specific roles, it's time that we step up and stand behind them in making that opportunity for them.
And I'll just throw this to the group, but Monika and Serena, particularly since you haven't spoken yet, would anyone want to define mentorship versus sponsorship? I think if we've mentioned both and said a little bit about both, but I think it's also worth, if you aren't familiar with those terms before and how they differ and why they are both important. And I would actually include peer mentorship in that as well. If anyone wants to offer their definitions of that, go for it, Serena.
I can jump in. So I'll do it in two ways. So sponsorship, I think Tonia, Catherine, you've both spoken to it in that you're putting your political capital, you're being an active sponsor, putting your voice behind somebody that needs the visibility, that needs the platform and needs the amplification. Whereas mentorship is done so in a way of advice and coaching and, connecting you behind the scenes to individuals that might help you develop in the areas that you're seeking development in. And, a clear distinction, I think, is an example that I had very early in my career. I found myself at a table of senior executives, all men, and I was presenting the work that I had done to progress change in the organization. I had metrics, I had the numbers, I had everything. The questions, though, all went to my male leader. Every single one, not even a glance over towards me. And, that's a tough position to be in. You're trying to show your expertise and you're muted. And so the active sponsorship that I saw in that moment was all the questions were deflected right back to me through my male leader. He said, Serena, you did the work, you take this one. Serena, you know this, you take this one, you know the numbers. And that was where I saw it really come into play in my career. And so now too, on top of everything, Danica, Catherine, Tonia, you said, a big part in what I find my leadership role is to challenge my male counterparts on active sponsorship of underrepresented individuals in our organizations. You're putting yourself out there again, and you're challenging the status quo, and it's difficult. It's an uncomfortable conversation sometimes. But if you anchor it in respect and the facts of what you're seeing, it goes a long way to bring others onto this journey of sponsorship.
Yeah, and I think.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that, Claire.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that mentorship also works. It works both ways. So just because you might be a junior executive in an organization, don't think that you don't have mentorship or something to offer to executives that are above you, especially now that we're living in the digital times that we find ourselves in. Oftentimes people that are in the C-suite or higher up in the organization don't necessarily have a grasp on all the digital tools and the evolution that's underway there. So I've seen a lot of really great productive relationships where the mentoring actually happens from the bottom to the top. And so everybody really has a role to play as a teacher and a student, even at junior levels in the organization. So I think those opportunities are really good for people also to showcase what their knowledge base is and to really form those relationships, as Serena was suggesting, with people that are higher in the organization.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to suggest your mentorship. If you'd like to be mentored, there's always the value you can bring to the table as something you can lead with, instead of just asking for someone's time or asking for their advice.
100%.
I want to pass it over to Monika. Maybe, you've worked at a lot of great companies over the years. We're talking a lot about sort of individual onus, self-advocacy, people you go seek out as sponsors or mentors. Maybe, have you seen any structural programs that you have been very impressed by, or lack thereof, and wish there was more of? How can companies and teams and leaders bring this to their teams rather than having it all on the women or someone that needs it to do it for themselves?
Yeah, so I think there are two parts to it. One is what you can do yourself, And I think the first part is you overcome your own biases, the lack of confidence or, the culture that I come from. I was actually just thinking this morning, in my high school debate, I went to an all-girls school. And so we were talking about the topic of that debate was, behind every successful man, there's a woman. And as I look back at the very topic itself, that right there seeded in me that I was second to someone, that I did not need to have the front seat or the driver's seat and sort of push ahead. So I think that, for me to have over the years, sort of saying, no, I got to raise my hand, I got to ask, all of the things mentioned by everyone here, men raise their hands for a promotion before they're ready. And, the woman waits to be 120% ready before she even raises her hand. And that's borne out by company data. When you are in large technology companies, you self-nominate for promotion, and women are fewer to nominate themselves. When you apply for a position across the group within the same company, most women are applying laterally. Most men are applying, one level up. So I think that itself says that women are lacking a little bit of confidence and that they have to overcome themselves and feel stronger about that. But I think as we talk about sort of the part two, which what others, leaders, women leaders and others can do for women, I think there are two things. Certainly there's mentorship, there's peer mentorship, which is huge. I think the value of talking to someone in the same boat and figuring those stories out is huge. The second part that in addition to sort of mentoring and sponsorship is advocacy. Advocacy is what you do for people that you're not asked to do, or you're running for someone, pushing for someone when they're not even in the room and they're, sort of somewhere else, and you're actually bringing up their name for a promo, for an assignment, for a trip abroad, whatever that plum prize is. So as women leaders rise, I think it behooves them to actually be advocates of things. One simple example I'd like to give is, we were in a meeting, and this was I worked at an internal company, a consulting group in a company. And obviously the biggest thing there, and I think Catherine will relate to that, is who goes to that plum assignment, right? And you're, managing resources, and, there's a woman who's just had a baby, 3 months old, and there's a young man who looks ambitious, is very articulate, very eager to work. And the decision the committee is making, okay, the guy's going to New York, and the woman probably needs a local assignment. And I just said for a second, and why? And, this guy tells me, she just had a baby. I'm like, okay, but should we ask both of them, like whether they want to go or not? And sure enough, we come back a week later, and it turns out the guy had a trip planned, so he didn't want to go. And the woman had figured out childcare and wanted to go, right? So I think we want to talk about these things a little more, because that's how we sort of ask the questions and change some decisions for women who deserving, are ambitious, and we have to give them the chance to get the right opportunity. So it's a lot on women ourselves as we make the paths for other women.
That's a great example. The assumptions, I've heard a little bit of the unconscious bias, right, of people just going to the male by default. And these aren't things that people even are trying to do on purpose, right? I think that's always a little bit of a sad realization, is that it's not even active, work on other people's parts to keep women out of leadership positions, but it's just so ingrained. And that flip side, I think, just to move on maybe to back to what we can do as women, is this concept of confidence I'm hearing as a theme, and putting yourself out there. And I think a term that gets used a lot that I resonate with is imposter syndrome, right? So if you raise your hand too early, and women need the 120%, you feel like an imposter. And, maybe we go back to you, Catherine, have you ever felt it? How did you overcome it? Do you see it in other women? Or at this point, are you so sure of yourself that you no longer?
Oh my goodness. No. As I was thinking about a few things to share with you today, I really reflected on this, and I thought, my gosh, I think we've probably all felt imposter syndrome at some point in our career. And for maybe those of you joining us today who haven't heard the term before, and apologies, I probably don't have the textbook definition of it, but it's really that notion that you're either put forth for a role, or you're in a role And others may certainly feel that you are very capable and confident of filling that role, but that you yourself may not feel so. And so you feel like a bit of an imposter. And so, you're constantly got this dreaded feeling of, is somebody going to really find this out about me, that I'm not capable? But the fact is that you are capable. And so what can we do in organizations to help people? And I don't believe it's something that's limited to women or minorities. Lots of men feel it too. And I actually once said that on another panel I was on, and a young man actually came to my office afterwards and thanked me for saying that many men feel it too, because he said he felt it all the time. But little things that organizations can do, this concept of executive presence and helping people feel more confident when they're in a room with others, in terms of how you present, how you speak, the content of material, those sorts of things, are things that we can help people with if they feel they may need a bit more support with that. But also offering people opportunities as well, where they feel that they can succeed. And that in turn goes to help building confidence. And then you've got, you're able to take those thoughts that you have and turn that into action through improved confidence. So there's lots of things. And again, I'll come back to this theme of just being open and comfortable with sharing with a trusted group of peer mentors, as others have mentioned, or more formal mentors or sponsors who you have around you in the workplace or in your personal life as well.
I would love to jump in on the imposter syndrome note as well. I face imposter syndrome probably on a weekly basis. And I think that part of changing that and inciting positive change with that is admitting that to people. I think that, we need to make it very clear to people who, see us on panels or see us in leadership positions that, hey, I'm afraid a lot of the time too. I'm not 100% confident. And, when I've kind of tried to find out where some of the rooted issues of my imposter syndrome lie from, as a Black woman, a woman who comes from an immigrant parents' background, a lot of the time people in my type of situation, their parents have a scarcity mindset. We're taught to take what you can get and, kind of just be comfortable and content with the things that you have. And I've identified that I do and oftentimes have a scarcity mindset. And for me, it's been so important to find mentors and seek out relationships with people who have abundance mindsets and growth mindsets. People who don't think in terms of limits and limiting beliefs or anything like that, but people who actually believe that they can accomplish anything they want. And, being continuously exposed to people like that has helped me train my mindset so much and kind of, get rid of some of that imposter syndrome.
I love that. And I know that's a big concept in education too, right? That children who believe that they can continue to learn, whether they're good at something at that moment, have a much higher rate of success at learning it rather than someone who thinks they're already innately good or bad at something. So it's something that starts with us in childhood even, right? And comes through to these professional conversations in our professional lives. I want to go back to sort of the top level too, which is, how do leaders on this call, how do you set the tone for your companies, for your teams, for the people around you, for ways that you aren't the same as your male colleagues or things that you do have to do differently. I think, Tonia, I'm going to go to you because you mentioned your children at the top of this, right? How, and we had that great example about the woman coming back from maternity leave. Like that's a reality of some differences here. And how have you set the tone in your professional life around being a mother and being a professional?
Yeah. Well, first, before I answer that, I just want to acknowledge what Danica said about the abundance mindset. I just wrote that down, and that's going to be my new mantra going forward. So thanks for sharing that. See, we all learn from each other. But I think this is a really important question, and I think it speaks to the whole imposter syndrome. I really try to foster an environment where people are encouraged to take risks, and they're encouraged to fail. and learn from those failures. So my concern always is that people aren't operating at their full capacity. Not that saying that I want them working every single hour of the day, but I want for them to be able to share all that they have to offer, contribute all that they have to offer to a company, and the company can in return make sure that people are being really fulfilled in terms of their purpose from a career perspective. So I encourage risk taking. I encourage people to really stretch themselves beyond their core, and really try to identify some of their superpowers that they never knew they had, but they'll never discover that unless they're taking those risks and they're experiencing some failure. And I think with women, that's a particularly an area of focus, because just like everyone has shared here, that imposter syndrome tends to hold people back, tends to hold women back quite a bit. The other thing that I do, and you mentioned my children, is that I very much share my life, and I'm very open about my life and the struggles and the vulnerabilities that I face day in and day out. Mia, one of the individuals listening today, sent a question over to me asking how I balance career and family. I actually don't believe in balance. Balance suggests perfection, and perfection is not really achievable. And I don't want to ever want for anybody to think it is, because you're always going to continue to strive for that and feel that you're inadequate because you can't accomplish it. I try to be present. I'm trying to very much be present here in this moment and really enjoying this conversation and getting as much out of it that I hope I'm contributing. And in the background, there's some kids that are running around and doing God knows what, but I'll get to them later. So I always say that I'm perfectly out of balance in terms of my life between profession and personal or family and work. But that's okay. And letting other women know that and sharing that with them. I don't try to hide it or package it up so nice and neatly that people think that it's something that they should be striving for. So I always share that whenever I meet people, whenever I'm interviewing them, that yes, I am really focused on my career. I love having a career, but I just as much and more so love my family. And they're going to show up here in my workspace during the day, and I may sometimes need to walk away or to focus there because that's where I'm needed.
And that's great points, Tonia. I just want to add to that. I think the one aspect we have as women is vulnerability, and we can bring our whole selves more easily. So I think being open and transparent and bringing our whole self to work helps set the tone in your group, in your company, in your team to, okay, I need to leave now, but you can call me on my cell phone. Okay, now we're in this Zoom call era. Like, why don't you pick up your toddler that's crawling right around? Let's take a break. Even in a meeting, 10 people, I think you should excuse yourself because you need to look at what's happening right behind you. I think that empathy comes naturally to us. So whether, I actually coach one member about to present to the team tomorrow more actively on sidelines because I think they need that support, or I pause a conversation and say, let's hear from so who's been trying to speak up. I think those are all the culture tenets that one can set up as a leader, that you're continuously looking out for people, you're supporting them, and continue to support everyone in your actions. Your actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, I want to also think about a little bit. So, Serena, this might be for you. There is a difference, I would say, between the corporate people's experience in corporate and people's experience in startups, right? And particularly, I know we have a very sort of tech-focused audience today and might be working more in the startup set. How do you see, what does this conversation bring up with you specific to that environment and different challenges women might have in startups versus, and you've been in both environments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer it kind of in two parts. The first being, we've touched on a lot of it too. For women founders or women identified founders, imposter syndrome is real. getting the sponsorship, the mentorship, the advocates to push your idea and your startup along, and also to help you learn how to manage the changes of starting your own business. All of that is the same or very comparable in the startup world and or the corporate world. One thing I think that's, I wouldn't say unique to women, I would say it's unique to all underrepresented founders, is simply access to funding. The systematic barriers, they're there, they've existed for a long time. People are paying attention now, but habits are hard to change. And it takes time to understand it where it becomes a habit, a new habit for you, right? You've got to unlearn your biases and address your unconscious biases in order to actually progress in the way that you approach things to bring more equality in the systems you can impact. So funding is just a challenge, right? But I did watch a recent, actually it wasn't that recent, it was a video, a TED Talks by, I wrote her name down, Dana Kenzie. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It's on implicit gender bias in startups. And this is along the pitch kind of process where you're trying to go out there to investors and give your idea. And it's founded on the idea of the theory of regulated focus. So promotional kind of focused discussion and dialogue versus preventative. And the idea around that is that there was a clear distinction of unconscious bias or implicit bias that went to the form of questioning that went to male founders. It was more promotional. So it was focused on what are the wins, what's the opportunity, what's the potential. So again, back to that potential versus experience. Whereas the typical questions that were coming to women were around preventative. So what's the risk factors? Basically prove your numbers, prove your rationale, your thinking and your business model that you're de-risking our investment. And that unconscious bias changes the dialogue, right? And so it creates a different dynamic in the opportunity investors see versus the risk they see in certain businesses' investments. So, advice to all of the aspiring entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs out there, or current ones who are working towards funding, take the time to watch this video. Recognize the types of questions you're getting and try to change that dialogue in the way that you're answering to be more focused around the promotional language. Show them the opportunity, show them the win, celebrate. Again, advocate for yourself. And then if there are any investors on the line, this is a great opportunity to kind of check your systems and processes, right? How are you going to show up during a pitch competition? How are you vetting a female founder or a woman-identified founder versus a male founder? Maybe even just set up a template where it's either all promotional language or preventative language, and regardless of who that founder is in front of you, use the same tactic. So this is our opportunity to address some of those implicit biases. And so I would say, look at those resources, self-reflect on your own processes, and know that that's a reality that exists right now for all of the women founders out there. We'll chip away at it, but for now, we need to make progress in the little steps that we can, while bigger voices and bigger systems address some of the systematic causes.
That is a fantastic piece of advice. And I want to do a quick, I know we have a lot of questions, great questions from the audience, so I want to get to them. So I'm going to do one last sort of quick fire round with the group before we do that, which is, we've spoken about sponsorship, mentorship, peer mentorship. Just name one person who sponsored you, mentored you, you mentored. Let's shout out one woman, or maybe you don't know them, but they've inspired you. Shout out one woman on this panel to the world and give them their what they did for you and why you're so appreciative. Anyone can, since I didn't warn anyone about this question, to letting the audience know, I'm going to give everyone just 2 seconds to think. And so I will ramble on until someone seems ready.
Okay, I'll go first. It's more about being inspired in this case. So Carly Fiorina was my first CEO. I was at Hewlett Packard. I love the way she brought two large companies together, tech giants, and I saw her stand at stage. I was very junior, my first job, and I think it was more inspirational that a woman can do it in a fully tech industry at the time. And so I think that piece and she would always say about the power of not to give up one thing or the other, to the points Tonia was making, you are incomplete in some ways or can't have it all, but you can you can still add on. So that was really, really inspiring, and it still powers me to this day.
Great.
I can jump in next. I follow a woman named Bozoma St. John. Her handle is Badass Boz on all of social networks. And she was very inspiring to me because, just for context, she used to be the head of Apple Music. She's now a VP at Endeavor. And she is a Black woman in the marketing industry, in the tech industry, in a space where there's not a lot of women who look like us. And she shows up unapologetically herself at every event all the time. She comes through with, big long box braids and kente, like African attire, and she's unapologetically herself. And by seeing that, I believe that, you know what, I actually do have space at the table. I can own my narrative because she has, and she's been successful. So Bozoma St. John is my everything. And I don't even need to interact with her often. I can just follow all of her works, her tweets, her talks, and that's all I need to keep going.
Mm-hmm. She is fantastic. If she's a great Instagram follow, if you just need a place to look for some of these women and hear more voices, I highly recommend her. Serena, you look
I can
ready?
jump in. I'm going to kind of change it to shine the spotlight on a lot of the women entrepreneurs that I've been encountered, to see the work that they're doing, the risks that they've taken in their lives, the genius that they bring to the table, and the ideas and the solutions that they're trying to solve for. That's one thing where every day, I'm challenged in the work that I'm trying to do to support startups and or learn more about it, to see that many women exist. And so everybody out here should take the time to do some digging on those up and coming female founders or women identified founders. There's some really, really creative solutions coming to the forefront, and they're doing it and taking big risks by, regardless of their previous status, their current status, they're putting their livelihood, their personal lives kind of in a completely non-conventional or non-traditional environment to pursue a dream where they know they can bring value and be a voice for whatever solution it is that they're bringing. So shout out to all those wonderful women that I've had the opportunity to speak with, because every day it pushes me that much further to continue fighting along the path that I'm fighting along.
I'm going to answer with something that's a little different. It's actually not a woman, but I want to highlight a man who sponsored me in a very significant way, Randy Falco, who was the CEO of Univision, and before that was president at NBC for many years, and comes from an era when there were very, very few women in the boardroom and in the C-suite. The reason I mention him is because I think it's really important, especially as the women that are participating here, either on the panel or in listening, that it's really important that as we start to organize women leadership opportunities within organizations, that we don't think of it just as a women's issue. It's really, really important to enroll men, particularly right now as we're seeing a lot of the activity that unfolded over the last few years with the Me Too movement, which I really understand and appreciate and stand behind. But also, keep in mind that for Randy Falco to sponsor me, which like I said, very meaningful sponsorship, my concern is that if that doesn't continue, men sponsoring women, that people will start to, question, well, why is he sponsoring her? Like, what else is going on there? That there's that because of the Me Too movement, there may be some unintended consequences that go along with it. So I really advocate thinking of all of these issues and challenges that we face in the workforce environment with female leaders, that we not think about it just as a female or a women's issue, that we really think about it more as a workplace issue. And enrolling men is critically important in order to make progress as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Claire, I'll just wrap up quickly by answering your question. I don't have to think twice about it. There's a wonderful woman named Denise, who I've been very close to for about 25 years now. She was a partner at EY when I first joined the firm in a junior role. And she sponsored me. And she felt I was very capable oftentimes when I did not feel I was capable at all. And she is just one of those people. And I realize what draws me to her is her authenticity and her friendship. And I was just texting with her yesterday. We're still close it's been 25 years now. But if I ever have to point to that female mentor for me throughout my career, she's absolutely it. And it's so wonderful to have a long-standing role with someone who can be in that role for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I will, since I asked, I will add here at the end, I would name a woman, Liz Warwick. She works at Liberty Mutual. She was on a project with me when I was very early in my career. And I had worked only in companies with male leadership up until my current role. And which, they were all wonderful and supported me, very much supported me and sponsored me in their own ways. But it was the first time I had worked with a senior level woman, and she just very similar, always believed I was capable of doing something. And I think we just actually had a question come in of matching, what makes a great mentor. And I think there's a number of answers, but one is, it's that age-old question of, would you talk to a friend the way you talk to yourself, right? If you would say something negative to yourself, would you also say that to your friend? And I have found that someone who is just there to remind you of your own capabilities and remind you of your own strength makes a wonderful mentor, whether it's peer or otherwise, and something that I've always valued greatly. So with that, we'll jump into a couple questions. I just have to give a fair warning, audience. We have so many great ones, so we'll get to a couple. And I hope that people continue the conversation within their own workplaces, within their own environments, and even, within their own families. The first one I want to ask, which is something we had not touched on at all, is re-entry into the workforce for mothers. And Catherine, did I hear you right? This is something you did, right? Or you said you came in twice, right? So when it comes to women, not maybe in that entry level role, but they've come out of the workforce and coming back in, what advice would you have for that?
Yeah, so my experience was when I was self-employed as a consultant, and I chose to do that so that I would have the flexibility to be with my young kids. My advice at that is to make sure that you're maintaining your network while you're off, and that doesn't have to feel forced. It just can be connecting with a friend who you maybe used to work with for a coffee or in these days a video chat, and just talking to people about opportunities. The other thing I would add is, I, as I'm sure many of us do, we get lots of requests on LinkedIn, and, lots of people want to have a conversation. And I think it's such a great tool, right? And I would say my advice would be, don't be shy. If you're off right now and looking to get back in, look at some of the content, make some connections, and say, hey, I would love to meet with you or have a quick phone call. And, people will absolutely reciprocate.
Mm-hmm. It's a great one. Anyone else on that one? We'll move on. There are some great books. I can perhaps add one. I can't think of the title off the top of my head, but in terms of also thinking about whether you want to leave the workforce, if that's a consideration, if you're, about to have a family or thinking about having a family, and sort of making those decisions around how that impacts your career in the long term, and what questions, it's not a good or bad decision, but what questions you can ask yourself when you make those decisions to make sure it's the right one for you. And that's something that I very much did. Let's see. Here's a question about COVID-19, which we sort of spoke about at the beginning, but would love to hear about how COVID-19 and work from home seems to affect women in their thoughts presently and in the future outlook. Before this panel discussion started, I had seen some data that 14% of women are considering leaving the workforce thanks to coronavirus and the burden of being home and potentially being the primary caretaker. So I'm curious what other people have seen within maybe their own circles, or how it's affecting them. I have 2 young kids. It's been incredibly challenging. So I'm just here for moral support if anyone needs to talk.
Yeah, if I can chime in here, I think we're all struggling in these times, as parents, as caregivers. I think that the challenge, the burden on women, it just feels naturally more. So, if I can speak to some of the bigger companies and how they're operating, certainly offering more leave. You can take part off, you can scale back, you can do certain hours. There's a lot more flexibility being offered. But I think the most valuable thing that we as leaders, as community of other women can offer is just this moral support, like being able to talk through it, like the misery loves company, right? Just being able to vent a little bit, I think is also very valuable and goes a long way in acknowledging that and being accommodative of other mothers who need the time, just the flexibility in your schedule as a leader because others need your support. So those things help.
Great. Anyone else on?
I would just say that it would be very unfortunate if companies start to lose talented women, if they have to step back because of continued, work from home situations or the lack of childcare and daycare. And with that in mind, I think the onus is really going to be on the employer to figure this out and to solve for this if this becomes our new normal. I know that there are many women in our organization who are extremely valuable to us. If they were to step away, it would be a big loss for our company. So what we've been doing is trying to find ways to support them in light of the fact that they have young children at home. It's a dual working family, both father and mother are working. So we have to now harness that as the potential new reality. And how do we support? We already have a shortage of, I think Catherine shared, how she stepped away, not knowing if she could manage that, having a family. It would be unfortunate if we were to continue to lose more women as a result of this COVID-19. So I feel really strongly that the onus is really on us. And I don't think there's really much more that women who are in this position could possibly do or ask of themselves. So please don't feel as if you have to, again, do better or become, a superwoman in order to manage this. That's not a reality.
It would be great if it was. We could all be superwomen. All right. Ian, how are we doing on time?
Guys, I guess the curse of having such successful women on our panel is that they are incredibly busy. And I do know a few of you do have a 2 p.m. Eastern, so I'm conscious of that. I do just want to take a moment just to recognize that you guys have inspired so many, and you've spent this valuable time inspiring our community. And I really do hope this is the generation of enlightenment around equality. And I feel the burden on myself as the only male on this panel right now on the screen. But I do hope there were a lot of men tuned in, because to Tonia's point, it really is about equality and recognizing and learning. And I do hope that we see more men spending time learning about these realities and empowering themselves with that knowledge to help women in their endeavors. And I know that there are a lot of men that do embody that point. So I want to thank everyone for taking time to share your learnings and your experiences with our amazing community. It was such a fantastic conversation. I was glued to the screen the entire time. Thank you, Claire, for moderating this so brilliantly. You did a phenomenal job. And thank you to Laura in the background for pulling this all together. She's sitting quietly behind video. She's been a phenomenal force in making this possible at BrainStation. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. BrainStation is here to support you in your lifelong learning endeavors. And we hope to see you in our future panels where you get to learn and empower yourself with knowledge. And thank you to everyone once again. It is 5 past the hour. We wish you a wonderful day. There will be a recording of this coming to you. So rest assured you will be able to look back on a lot of these points and also a lot of those questions we'll hope to get to that weren't answered. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon, guys, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.